What if everything you've been told about human history is incomplete? Not entirely false, but carefully simplified. Cleaned up, made easier to accept. Because the truth, if it exists beneath all of this, might be far more unsettling than most people are willing to confront. Think about this for a moment. Every civilization we know of, every empire, every discovery, every advancement follows a pattern. Slow development, trial and error, gradual progress. But then, when we look at one of the oldest known civilizations in human history, something doesn't quite fit that pattern. The Sumerians didn't slowly evolve into complexity. They appeared with it. Almost suddenly, they had systems mathematics, astronomy, architecture that shouldn't have existed at that stage of human development. They understood planetary movements. They created structured societies. They built cities with intention, not experimentation. It's as if they skipped the early stages entirely, and that raises a question that historians often avoid or quickly move past. Where did that knowledge come from? Because knowledge in tonne just appear. It's either discovered or taught. Now this is where things begin to shift into territory that most people are uncomfortable exploring. Ancient Sumerian texts written on clay tablets thousands of years ago repeatedly mention a group of beings, not metaphorically, not symbolically, but directly. They were called the Anunnaki. For centuries, they were interpreted as gods. That's the simplest explanation after all. Ancient people didn't understand advanced concepts, so they labeled anything beyond them as divine. That's the standard narrative. But if you look closer at the descriptions, something feels off. These beings were not described as all-powerful or mystical in the way we imagine gods today. They had needs. They had conflicts. They made decisions, sometimes even mistakes. They weren't omniscient. They weren't abstract forces. They were present, physical, real in a way that suggests they weren't imagined but observed. And once you start looking at them not as gods, but as an advanced species interacting with early humans, everything begins to change. Because now the question isn't, what did ancient people believe? The question becomes, what did they actually see? According to certain interpretations of these ancient texts, the Anunnaki did not come to Earth out of curiosity or exploration. They came with a purpose or need, something specific they were looking for. Said resource, as controversial as it sounds, is believed by some to be gold. Not for wealth, not for decoration, but for survival. The theory suggests that their own world was in danger, and gold had properties that could help stabilize or repair their environment. Whether that's scientifically accurate or not isn't the point here. What matters is the consistency of the narrative. They needed something from Earth, and extracting it was not easy. Mining is slow. It's dangerous. It requires labor, coordination, and time. And if these beings were as advanced as the texts suggest, it raises a logical question. Why would they do the work themselves? This is where the story takes a darker turn. Instead of continuing the labor on their own, they made a decision. A calculated one, If the work was too demanding, they would create a solution. Set-Solution, according to this interpretation, was as early human-like beings already existed on Earth, primitive, limited, not yet capable of complex thought or organized labor. But they were close enough to be altered. So the claim is this: the Anunnaki modified them. They introduced changes at a genetic level, adjustments that would increase intelligence, adaptability, and obedience. Not to create equals, but to create something useful, or workforce. Now pause here, because this is the point where most people instinctively reject the idea. It sounds too extreme, too deliberate, too controlled. But think about the direction humanity is already moving in today. Genetic editing, artificial selection, designing organisms for specific purposes. We are already stepping into that role ourselves in a limited way. So the real question isn't whether it's possible. The question is whether it could have happened long before we understood it. If humans were, in some form, influenced or altered intentionally, then our origin story is not just biological, it's strategic. And if that's true, then we have to confront something even more uncomfortable. We were not created to be free. We were created to function. And this is where the idea of a deal begins to emerge. Not necessarily a deal in the way we understand contracts today, but an exchange. Structure. A balance between what was given and what was expected in return. According to these interpretations, humans were given something incredibly powerful: awareness. The ability to think, to question, to perceive reality beyond instinct. Consciousness itself. But that awareness may have come with limitations, because throughout ancient stories, not just in one culture, but across many, there is a repeating theme. Humans reaching for knowledge and being stopped, punished, restricted, warned. Over and over again, the same message appears in different forms. There are things you are not supposed to know. Why? If knowledge is harmless, why restrict it? Unless knowledge changes behavior. Unless awareness breaks control. Because a being that fully understands its position in a system is far less likely to remain inside it without resistance. Now bring that idea into the present. Look at the structure of modern life. The routines, the expectations, the systems people operate within every day. Most individuals follow patterns they didn't design, working toward goals they didn't fully choose, rarely stopping to question the larger framework. And when they do question it, they are often dismissed, distracted, or redirected. Not through force, but through information. Because control today doesn't look like control in the past. It doesn't need to. If you can shape what people say, what they believe, and what they prioritize, you don't need to control their actions directly. They will do it themselves, which leads to the most unsettling possibility of all. What if nothing ever changed? What if the structure that began thousands of years ago never disappeared, but simply adapted, evolved alongside us, becoming less visible but more effective? The names may have changed, the tools may have changed, but the pattern remains. Work, consume, repeat. Stay occupied. Stay focused on the immediate. And most importantly, don't look too far beyond what you're given. Because the moment someone starts asking deeper questions, the entire system becomes harder to maintain. So now you're left with a choice. Not about what to believe, but about what to consider. Because whether this theory is true or not, it forces you to confront something real. How much of your reality have you actually questioned? And if there were answers beyond what you've been told, would you even be allowed to find them? Or would you stop yourself before getting too close? Think about that carefully, because sometimes the most powerful control isn't forcing people to stay inside a system. It's making sure they never realize they're in one